The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
All right, so a pretty wild story from across the pond. That's Keir Starmer, the leftist Labour Prime Minister, resigning less than 2 years after a landslide victory for his party. It did not take long for him to lose power. Starmer going to remain in place till July 9. Then they nominate his successor. The UK, as you know, is a disaster. Very high taxes, next to no economic growth at all, an economy that's comparable in size to the state of Mississippi. The UK used to be the powerhouse of the world. Now it's, I think, smaller than Mississippi. It also has a migration disaster that Keir Starmer has done nothing about. Just last year, over 41,000 illegals flooded Britain's shores by boat, the second largest on record. And let's not forget the horrific details that Starmer's government helped to cover up on these Pakistani rape gangs, allowed to operate with impunity for years in the UK, thanks to tremendous left-wing white guilt, letting these gangs run through the country and do horrific things. Rupert Lowe, a UK member of parliament, has released a rape gang inquiry report that we looked into last week. This details the systematic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British, by predominantly Muslim Pakistani rape gangs across towns and cities up and down the country. So vile, it's almost difficult to even imagine this is a real thing. At least 250,000 young white girls have been subjected to repeated rape, gang rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma, as they have invited in a disaster into this once great nation. And Rupert Lowe joins us now, member of UK Parliament, leader of Restore Britain. And, sir, thank you for coming on tonight. This is your seventh prime minister in 10 years. What is happening in your country?
Well, let me just say, Rob, that was a great introduction. There was only one thing you got wrong in that. You called it a landslide election victory. I call it a landslip election victory.
Okay, fair enough.
Because it was yes, a large number of seats he won by, but the actual turnout was low, and his percentage of the vote was very low. So it was a landslip rather than a landslide. But you're quite right, and I think the fact we've now, I think there'll be 7 prime ministers in 10 years. If it was a corporation, you'd say it was pretty sick. And I think if you look at our debt levels, if you look at our taxation levels, if you look at our growth levels, you look at the regulation that's strangling productive Britain, you look at the growth of the state, you look at all the things that are oppressing the people, not least Keir Starmer's sort of Fabian agenda, which over 2 years has done untold damage. You have to say that we are not in a healthy position, and we need a lot of help from you guys over the other side of the Atlantic.
Right. Well, I don't understand what the voting public is voting for. I mean, I don't understand how that party still holds power. Your system's a little different than ours, but if they're decimating your country the way they are, they're decimating your economy, your migration disaster, this report that you just released about these rape gangs, how is there not just a huge movement pushing this country to the right?
Well, I think it's a very fair question, but under our Constitution, you have a 5-year term. And with such a big majority, I think it's unlikely, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely that Labour will have another general election. So Andy Burnham, who actually lost out in a leadership contest with Jeremy Corbyn, who is even further left than Keir Starmer, arguably a man, I think, of principle. So he says what he thinks, whereas I think Keir Starmer says almost the opposite of what he thinks. So this guy, Andy Burnham, lost out and then went off to be mayor of Manchester, which is a northern city in the UK. And he hasn't really done a huge amount for Manchester. Yeah. But I think Labour are in such dire trouble, they had to create what I call the Ghostbuster, which was to give them another chance at trying to win over the public. But the bottom line is when your standard of living is falling, when taxation is rising, when everything is becoming more and more expensive, the British people, I think, have had enough. And our rape gang report, which was necessary, was privately crowdfunded by 20,000 concerned citizens of the UK, and we raised £600,000. And we've carried out over a year, it's taken us to do the witness statements, to basically have a proper 2-week hearing, and then to write a report of 218 pages, which takes some reading. So look, I mean, it's a pervasive evil that's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years.
It's tremendous. It's and not to cut you off just simply because we're out of time, but that report, which we dove into significantly last week, was just horrifying. And if that, along with the other conditions that have been created in your country, don't wake up the people in that country, you wonder at what point do you lose hope. But we're wishing you the best.
I don't see, Rob, how anyone can ever vote Labour again after they facilitated.
I can't imagine how they could.
Pervasive evil.
Yeah, I can't imagine how they could. I got to leave it there, Rupert. But thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.